Hi, Eben. Thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Can you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Eben LeBerthon. I grew up in a small town in the Northern Bay Area of California. And I actually didn't grow up in a big agriculture family, but I got my first job kind of working for a neighbor hauling hay. And the more and more that I got into it, the more and more that I really found a passion for agriculture. So I went to the University of Arizona where I studied agribusiness, where I mostly focused on management and economics. And then from there kind of moved on and got a job in a development program with Land O'Lakes. And I have been there for the last couple of years working on the Purina feed side of the business.
Oh, wow. So you have a lot of experience in the field, and today you're going to be telling us about the food that we eat.
Yeah, and I'll do my best to answer any questions. The only thing that I will preface is just that I kind of have to say, these are the opinions and things that I've learned through
Mhm.
my experiences in the agriculture field, and through my education, and they're not necessarily the exact stances that maybe my company or other companies that I would have worked for might have taken, because there is a spectrum. Everybody has their
Mhm.
own opinions, even within the agriculture industry.
Yeah, and today we're wanting to hear about your opinion from your experience. So thank you so much for sharing that with us. And so, in your opinion, does the food that we eat impact our day-to-day functioning?
Yeah, definitely. I think the food that we eat has a really big impact on the way that we feel and the way that we function. I think in the United States, we tend to really focus on a lot of like fad diets, as well as really focusing on kind of organic versus conventional, and we're talking about those kind of foods. And I think a thing that we don't always understand is that here in the United States, we have access to some of the best quality produce, some of the best quality meats of anywhere in the world. But we also have a lot of access to a lot of processed foods. So it's really important to just kind of, eat the rainbow and eat these vibrant, beautiful, amazing produce that we have access to in the grocery store, and really focus on how great our access to food is and making quality food at home.
So, what is, in your opinion, quality food? So, what would be this is quality versus this is not quality or not to the same quality?
Yeah, I've heard a lot of different things about quality versus not quality food and those kind of things. In my brain, the big thing is kind of shopping around the outside of your grocery store or wherever you're purchasing foods. It's always great to be able to have options to shop local, go to local farmers markets, things like that. That's where you're going to get the freshest local ingredients. But grocery stores tend to put a lot of the junk food right in the center. You have to walk through these aisles and aisles of processed foods in order to get back to the meats counter,
Mm.
or in order to get around to the produce. But oftentimes, if you kind of stick to the walls and shop your way around, you'll find that that's where your produce is going to be, your meats are going to be, your seafood, your dairy. All of those options are kind of going to be around the outside.
So, what I'm hearing from you is, in your opinion, quality is what is fresh versus what's coming in a package.
Yeah, definitely. And like I said, we do have really, really amazing access to food in this country. But we do have really high access to processed foods that you might not see in other places. So as long as we're sticking to a lot of the produce, dairy, meats, cheeses, those kinds of things, and kind of staying away from the more processed foods, I think you'll see a huge difference in your nutrition, in the way that you feel, and in the way that you live as well.
So, when we're going around the edge of the grocery store, as you suggested, I know in my grocery stores it will say organic or conventional or just organic and then like apple. So, what is the difference between an organic apple and an apple, or organic produce versus conventional produce?
Yeah, and I think that's a question that we get a lot, and it's really hard to necessarily quantify it and break it down into a
Mhm.
really simplistic or easy option there. There definitely is a big difference between organic and conventional. But I'm going to say, and this is my own opinion, you know, you might have some organic farmers, and I mean, no disrespect to the organic farmers at all who are really adamant about the organics program. The biggest differences you see is in the way that that produce is grown and not so much in the actual end product.
Okay.
The reason of why, what I mean there is when you eat an apple, your body knows it's an apple. It breaks down the sugars and the fibers and everything the same, whether that was produced organically or produced conventionally. But there are some different qualifications there. There's some different standards for soils, for fertilizers, for pesticides, etc., on the organic side versus the conventional side. And when you see that increase of price at the grocery store, at the shelf, that increase in price isn't necessarily saying that one product is better than the other product. But since organic is cost so much more to produce, you are going to see that reflected in the product. If it costs me 10 cents to make an apple and I want to make 10 cents profit, then I'm going to be able to charge you 20 cents. But if it costs me $1 and I still want to make that 10 cents profit, you're going to pay $1.10. And that's really where that cost difference comes in terms of organics.
And does organic versus conventional, does that have anything to do with pesticides? And can you tell us a little bit about how pesticides impacts the food that we eat?
Yeah, of course. So there are some different qualifications for pesticides. The thing that I will say about pesticides in diet is, in short, there should be no effects there. We follow these really strict standards on pesticide usage in the United States, whether that's conventional or traditional farming. Or conventional or organic farming is what I meant to say. And the big thing that we do there is this program called IPM, or Integrated Pest Management. So the idea there is, you know, back in the day, maybe we used these harsher, broader spectrum pesticides and we didn't necessarily know how they affected our environment. We start to see pollinator loss, you know, beneficial pests that we want to see in our gardens, spiders that might be eating our mites, those kind of things that are also dying with these pesticides. So we came out with this program called Integrated Pest Management, in which we start with the least harmful to the most harmful. So least harmful would be something like a beneficial parasite. So maybe like a wasp that can take out your mites or something of that nature. And then you kind of target a specific pest once it's past a controllable level. And I think controllable level is really important there too. A lot of times you might not treat for a pest because it's not really hurting how much your production is. And other times you do need to treat for that pest. So I think people get really scared about pesticides, but A, we have a really great program here in the United States, and B, not to get too far in the weeds, but there's kind of a certain standard for how long you're allowed to go in harvesting after treating with a pesticide. So a farmer is not allowed to even enter the field again to look at their crops until after that pesticide has been through its half-lives, has been deemed safe and non-toxic. And then you have an even greater time period before you're allowed to harvest. So by the time that produce is harvested, the pesticide that had been sprayed has either been washed out by rain, water, etc. It's gone through its half-lives to be no longer toxic to any living creatures there. And then once it's harvested, it's washed pretty thoroughly as well. So as far as pesticides go, it's more of a concern kind of in terms of our pollinators than it would be, or if you're a neighbor to a farm, kind of overspray, those kind of things, then it would really be a concern as to the products that you're going to get on your shelf. You can feel 100% confident that you won't be ingesting any pesticides with anything that you'll be able to purchase in a grocery store here in the States.
So what about produce that comes in from other countries outside of the United States? Do they have the same standards if they're selling to grocery stores in America?
Yeah, and I don't have as much expertise kind of in this. I don't have a ton of experience, but I have been to border crossings in Arizona through Mexico, and we do import quite a bit of produce from Mexico. And what you'll see as you approach these border towns is you'll see these massive warehouses for miles.
Mhm.
And it's because those are the where refrigerated storage in which produce comes in from Mexico. So, there might not be as specific standards in other countries as we have here, but we do have standards for what produce has to pass in terms of inspection when it comes into this country. And then those refrigerated warehouses are there for a reason. You cannot just bring produce across the border and drive it directly to a grocery store. That's not the
Okay.
way that it works. You have to bring it in, and it does sit in a warehouse. It goes through inspections. It's got to sit
Mm.
there for a certain period of time to make sure that they're not bringing over even something as little as a worm that maybe grows in Mexico that they don't want to get in US soil.
Yeah.
They're really, really good about making sure that all of the produce that you're going to get at a market is going to meet those same sales standards that the USDA has set for produce.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that with us. And what about choosing food to feed our kids? Do you have any tips for choosing what is best for feeding children and for feeding our families?
Yeah, I would say in my personal opinion, I'm really big about kind of eating the rainbow. So eating lots of fresh foods and vegetables, things like that. People oftentimes ask me like, I really want to get the best quality produce.
Mhm.
The first thing that I always say is, how much produce are you getting right now? Are you adding more to your diet, or are you just looking for a
Yeah.
better option? I think the first step would always be to add more vegetables, add
Mhm.
more quality foods into our diet, like we talked about. The second step is, whatever food makes you feel good and makes you feel
Mm.
happy is what's best for you. In my opinion, I really like shopping locally when I have the opportunity. I know that I'm getting fresher quality ingredients. I know I'm putting that money directly into a local farmer's hands. And I know that that money is going to stay in my community and build my community for longer as well. So if I do have the option to go out to a farmer's market and interact directly with the farmer and kind of cut out the middleman there, that's something that I definitely recommend. I guess one other thing that I'll say here is to not let your own decisions or your own feelings get in the way of a child's nutrition. And by that, what I mean is that just for example, nearly 30% of men and 60% of women in the United States do not get enough calcium in their diet.
Whoa.
And that is something that traditionally doctors really heavily recommended dairy and dairy products because
Yeah.
that's a really, really easy way to get calcium and nutrition into a child, into a person. It's cheap, it's readily available, and it's very high in calcium.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of kind of trending more towards vegan or plant-based, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. And if you want to keep your entire family vegan or plant-based, that's totally okay as well. But I think it's important for us to kind of think about the ramifications of our decisions and know that, hey, if I'm going to cut out dairy for say as a source of calcium to my child, where am
Mhm.
I going to supplement that instead? So making sure that as we make these decisions to go with a certain dietary restriction or those things, that we're able to recompensate for that. And when you go to the grocery store, almost every grocery store carries vitamins nowadays too. So it's not too hard to find some way to kind of compensate for those decisions.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Eben. And if you like this video, please give us a thumbs up. And if you have any questions, feel free to leave comments below. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.